There will be an alliance between the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, and all the movements pro-Islam. And according to prophecy, they will rise, putting fire in all the main avenues and streets of Paris. The government, according to prophecy, will flee. This fiasco will not only take place in France and in Italy, Germany, Spain, and England.
The end times prophecies, the French Revolution. Is there a connection there? And what could that be? We've invited back Xavier Reyes-Ayral.
By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
But let's talk about the French Revolution. I picked up a book published by Tan back in the 1970s that goes over end times prophecies. And there's a lot of prophecies. You cover a lot of them in your book as well, that are specifically related to the French Revolution. I would like to hear your take on that, but specifically how these prophecies seem to indicate that the French Revolution is still in full swing and it's affecting the entire world, not just France. What say you, Xavier?
Yes, that's a very lucid analysis of events, particularly French history. The French Revolution, and I'm not going to go into a ever so boring long story, but it started in the very end of the 18th century, in the 1700s, and 1789. And it was initially inspired by Freemasonry. French population, which was going through, well, mostly in Paris, not in the French countryside, through financial and economical upheaval. No? The French population in Paris was going through some problems with the food distribution. There were issues in the French capital because of lack of organization and mismanagement. However, in the French countryside, the rest of the French countryside, in its immense majority, was living with a certain joie de vivre and with a profound devotion to God, to the king, and to France. Now, these particular aristocrats of France who were rebellious to the king were mostly inspired counterpart in Scotland and in England, who initially started since 1717 the first Freemasonic lodges anywhere in the European continent. And that is how the French Revolution started, with one principal objective: to eliminate monarchy, which had its roots deeply planted within the Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church. King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, who was in fact Austrian, she was the daughter of the Emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Their marriage was to seal an alliance between the French kingdom and the Empire of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Both of them were exemplary practicing Catholics. No? And they had some marvelous children. The eldest died in the beginning, at the very beginning of when the French Revolution began. The second one, whose name was likewise Louis, became automatically the Dauphin. The Dauphin is a title which translates into English for the Prince of France. Again, to make a long story short, when the revolution took place, the new parliamentary government passed a vote, whereas whether or not to execute King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, they could hardly execute through the guillotine young children. And the immense majority, or rather not the immense majority, but I would say a good half of the new parliamentary government was in favor, in view of the fact that Louis XVI agreed to make a new kingdom on the same basis as today England is, with a monarch that would be there simply to unite France, but the government would become democratic and popular. So finally, there were some aristocrats that became part of the French Parliament, Freemasons, who were distraught with the idea that their plans was about to fall on the floor, and they didn't have enough to condemn the King of France and his wife, the Queen. However, the French king had a cousin whose name was Philippe of the House of Bourbon, the royal family, but of the House of Orléans. This man was a Freemason. And his vote, and his vote alone, was that which shifted by 50.1% the vote in favor of executing his cousin, the king, and the Queen of France, Marie Antoinette. The line of both, rather Philippe, and he called himself Philippe Égalité, Philippe Equality, no? And his descendants are all the way up to here today, pretendant to the French crown. Now, the Blessed Virgin Mary, through mystics and visionaries, has said that the family d'Orléans, the descendants of Philippe Égalité, the man whose vote decided on the guillotine against King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, is a bad family. And it is not God's will for this branch of the royal family to ever sit on the throne ever again. As a matter of fact, we're a member today of the Bourbon of the House of Orléans, today in France, opened a few years ago a new Masonic lodge called, ironically enough, the Fleur de Lys.
Ooh.
Now, and that's where it gets interesting, Joe. I will reveal to you what we discussed before, I think, one of your shows, that a great secret, and one which is the approved apparition site of La Salette, approved by the local bishop and by the dicasterium of the doctrine of the faith of the time. And this is the secret. Louis XVII, young Louis XVII, who was but a mere 10 years old little boy, who was placed in a cell, disgracefully, in a jail called Le Temple. Supposedly, his body was found filled with disease and dead. But it was an autopsy. And the autopsy of that cadaver showed the cadaver of a young teenage boy, 14 years old. And it is said that it did not match the description of the little French prince. What's more, the doctor who was assigned to his jail, surprisingly enough, who took a great affection for the little boy, he took pity on the boy, suddenly when he was called to give testimony whether indeed the cadaver was the Prince of France, mysteriously disappeared, never to be found again. So, the secret of La Salette is this. Louis XVII, Prince of France, survived, was rescued by some faithful royalist, took him out of the Temple, replaced him with the corpse of a 14-year-old boy who was deaf and mute, and was taken out of France. Furthermore, the secret is this. The day will come when the descendant of Louis XVII will be called to come back to France at its worst period of history, to rescue not just France, to deliver it from an invader, and to restitute on the throne of Peter a new, quote-unquote, angelic pope. This French monarch, according to the visionaries of La Salette and of Marie-Julie Janis in La Fraudet in Brittany, chapter, most likely the largest chapter I wrote in my book, declared that this young man will be born in France, but again will be taken out of the country because of the innumerous enemies he will have. According to the prophecies, this French monarch, his existence has been made aware to his enemies, the Republicans, the Freemasons, who are actively looking for him, and the pretenders of today's French crown, whom, as I mentioned, come from a branch of a family that is less than reputable.
I think most people think that Napoleon basically put an end to the bloodshed or the carnage and the chaos of the French Revolution. But I argue that the French Revolution is alive and well and has spread throughout the world. And we saw that spread through the West. And now what the kind of chaos that we're seeing in all of these same governments, unless they turn back to God, they won't find peace, will they?
Absolutely. And this particular matter does not just limit itself to geopolitical matters or events. It involves including the Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church. To name but one, probably the most well-known example would be His Eminence Cardinal Martini, who used to be the Cardinal Archbishop of the city of Milan. He was a well-renowned Freemason, and his ideas today are followed by today's most highest authority within the Catholic Church hierarchy in Rome.
Was Marie Antoinette, was she a good Catholic? Or was she exactly as we've been told all these years? You know, let them eat cake is the famous phrase that we've been given. France in particular, as you pointed out in the last segment with French, with his prophecies, has a role to play in the end times. So let's talk about the end times in particular here. Can you give us, and you've done this in the past for us, can you give us a summary of the series of events that we will be seeing that will lead up to the final consummation and the second coming?
Absolutely. Very quickly, just before, with your permission, this sentence of let them eat cake, and by the way, be very careful and not to believe always in those Hollywood movies. I've seen the latest movies depicting Louis the XVI and Marie Antoinette. There is a lot of things that were true, but a lot of exaggeration and a lot of show from Hollywood that does not echo properly the history of that era. That being said, Marie Antoinette's phrase, let them eat cake, was when there were a small group of about 200 Parisians who came all the way to Versailles, who were hungry, and came to the gates, and they were demanding for a new administration to deliver food. And the King of France and the Queen came in to the gates and said, Mesdames, Messieurs, welcome to my home. How can I help you? And he listened to them and to their grievances. And they said, Your Majesty, we are hungry. We cannot feed our children. And the Queen immediately ordered the valet to bring all the cakes that were in the kitchen to give to the children and to the populace. And the king and the queen helped and helped serve the French people who came to their gates. And the French people went back to Paris. Wow. The French king and the queen were not made aware of the reality of the crisis that took place in Paris at the time. It was not a question of evil or anything of the sort. And as for Napoleon Bonaparte, when the guillotine took place, he was not, as the movie Napoleon lately depicted, witnessing the guillotine of Marie Antoinette. He was fighting the Battle of Toulon at the time. So be on your guard against Hollywood exaggeration or falsehood. As for the future and what has been predicted, what is coming, as of right now in France, is going through a tremendous turmoil. The French agriculturers, those who develop the lands, the farms, and so on and so forth, are mounting an assault on Paris as we speak. All the main roads from every cities of France that lead to Paris and outside Paris are being blocked by an army of tractors, an army of agriculturers and their families who are coming to Paris to protest. And this is leading all sorts of other groups in France rising against the politics of the newly elected prime minister who works with Emmanuel Macron, who is now today considered by some polls as the worst French president of the Fifth Republic, which was created by General de Gaulle. The situation is dire, and the army will not be used. The police cannot do anything without causing casualties. Already there's been some agriculturists that have been killed because of the situation, and all of France was in mourning. The situation is very, very bad. The economy is on its knees. And remember, we're talking about a country like France, who used to be, before the economic union of Europe became the European Union. France was the first agricultural power in the continent, first producer of wheat, first producer of milk, first producer of chicken and eggs. Now we are forced to burn thousands of tons of all our products in order to comply and let other Europeans import their products in France. It's absolutely outrageous. The communists are taking advantage of this situation in France. And they have formed a new political group called the NUPES, which has allied itself with the pro-Muslim parties in the country. Now, I am immensely grateful to say what I'm about to tell you as a Frenchman who watches the French news every day from his home in the States. But right now, there are more practicing Muslims in France than there are practicing Catholic. We're talking about the Catholic Church, eldest daughter. And this has been foretold, among others, by Marie-Julie Janis. The future. Now, the future predicts the following. According to the prophecies of Marie-Julie Janis in La Fraudet and of La Salette, there will be further uprising in France. There will be a sort of a new revolution. In the words of our Lord, I must call Frenchmen against Frenchmen, although they are not. In this event, our Lord meant all the paper Frenchmen, that is to say, the immigrants who have national papers, but who have absolutely no lost love for France, for history, or its culture. There will be, according to prophecy, and which today is already taking place, an alliance between the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, and all the movements pro-Islam. And according to prophecy, they will rise. They will to the point of putting fire in all the main avenues and streets of Paris, forcing the French government to leave the Élysée. The Élysée Palace is the equivalent of your White House in Washington. That's our White House in Paris. The government, according to prophecy, will flee. According to further prophecies from Marie-Julie Janis and La Salette and others, the Russians will take advantage of this chaos and this fiasco that will not only take place in France, but in Italy, Germany, Spain, and England, the major powers in the continent, and will, from that moment forth, initiate a military conflict that will take them through a blitzkrieg immediately up to the Rhine River.
Russia is paying attention very keenly as to the dynamics in all of these countries. What do they mean to do with that? I can't say. So where does that take us then? How long do these periods of war and conflict last before we see the rise of this French monarch? And is the French monarch born and raised in France? Is he French blood? Who is this person?
I'll go quickly. His name is Henry V of the Cross. That he will be known by that name. That man, that the Prince of France, the legitimate descendant of Louis XVI of Marie Antoinette, was born in France. Today he's not living in France, but he's aware and he's watching. And he's waiting for a privileged soul who will be chosen in France to come to him and guide him to go to France, to rescue France from an incoming invader, and to restitute and put back in Rome a true pope, an angelic pope.
You have an update of sorts, or you're going to be releasing an update of sorts on prophecy in February. What's that about?
Yes, that's a very good point. In the book, I write as well about more contemporary apparition sites, such as that of Garabandal, Medjugorje, and of a particular French-Canadian priest, Father Michel Rodrigue, in Quebec. Father Michel Rodrigue has made some prophecies. The latest one of all was that came from last summer, that tribulations would start in October of last year. And it happened exactly as he predicted. Now, with the attack, the war in the Middle East. He received on December the 31st a message from God the Father, which I have received in French and English, and which is to be released, and I've been already invited through a collection of podcasts to release it in mid-end of February.
Xavier, what do you anticipate happening in 2024?
The situation is truly grave. It's not just a subject of conversation on a radio show. The main purpose of this book and of this talk is simply to warn people of what is coming in 2024 will be pivotal. According to what we know, the war, particularly in Ukraine and in the Middle East, will spread. Right now, there are serious talks about the war spreading up to Iran, which is being considered as a target for the Allies. You mentioned earlier that Russia was watching. It is, but not just Russia. There are other nations of major powers, such as China and North Korea, that are waiting for the proper time to act. So I do believe that 2024 will be pivotal in the sense that the war will spread, and it will be a catalyst to something that will be unstoppable. As of right now, the war just in the Middle East is convenient to all parties. To Israel, because it gives them a pretext finally to take over Gaza, to finish with Hamas, or at least to try to, and with Hezbollah in Lebanon. With the Muslims as well, it is to their advantage, because just before the attack in October of last year took place, there were already pourparlers between Saudi Arabia and Israel for a sort of rapprochement, diplomatic gathering and friendliness. These did not match into the fundamentalist Islamic organization in the Middle East or in their plans. So this war now pushed completely Saudi Arabia on the side of the Muslim nations. So it is clearly in the purpose of Islam for this war to continue to form a unity between all Shiites, Sunnites, and Websalites. No, it is also to the advantage of the West, simply because now their presence is there, and it gives them a chance to strike at a nation of Iran, which has been enriching its uranium arsenal for the past few years. They are very close from having enough enriched uranium to develop a nuclear arsenal. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is something totally and completely unacceptable for the United States and for the European allies. So it is a war that is to everyone's advantage. Russia observes quietly. It's finishing Ukraine. Ukraine cannot stand much longer. When Ukraine falls, according to prophecies, all the events in Europe will start and will add up to this major fiasco. And then this matter that I mentioned would be unstoppable, would start to begin. And then we're going to enter into a new chapter of history that will be talked about and discussed as a point of reference for centuries to come.
According to the book Catholic Prophecy published by Tan, the French king will also be of German descent. Can you elaborate on this? I mean, the royal families they're all over Europe. They're basically of similar blood all over Europe, are they not?
Quite so. To give you an example, even the King of Spain today is a Bourbon. It comes from the line of Louis XIV.
Wow.
So yes, all the families, the royal families in England are half German, half English. They have some French as well, Scottish, and so on and so forth. It's all a mixture. But altogether, the French king, Henry V of the Cross, as Marie-Julie Gianni called him, as the children of La Salette called him, and others. And by the way, a king which has been mentioned as well in the writings of Saint Padre Pio. No, it's important to know that as well. But this man will be a descendant of Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette was Austrian, as I mentioned earlier. It's a Germanic nation. So yes, indeed, they will have some Germanic roots. But the man, Henry V, will be a Frenchman born in France, but raised abroad. And he will live a very humble life. He will try not to attract attention. No one will even suspect that he is who he is. So right now, as I mentioned, I don't even know if he's listening to this show. It's quite possible. He's watching, he's praying, and he knows exactly what his destiny is. He's waiting for this messenger to come and for his time to come. He's due to make himself known when the situation in France will be dire and will be partly invaded, not totally. And his task will be to come back to France, take the reins of whatever is left of the remnants of the French army and NATO, and push back through a miracle war and campaign the Russians, Eastern Europeans, and Muslim invaders who will come from the south. He will push them back all the way beyond the Rhine River, along with the Spanish king, according to prophecy, and he will start a campaign that will last about 3 years in Italy, to liberate Italy, reach Rome, and replace or place on an empty throne of Peter and quote-unquote an angelic pope, who will restore the glory of the Catholic Church, its rules, and the faith of yesteryears.
One thing that came to mind as you just were talking about the sort of the humbleness and in humility of Henry wherever he is, and of course he's listening. He's probably a big subscriber of the show. Of course, the French monarch would be listening. That's kind of a hilarious thought, to be honest with you. But I was reminded of the gospel today. Jesus in his own hometown, and the reason why that came to my mind is because Nazareth, which literally translates as branch town, meaning branch from the stump of Jesse, meaning David. So when the Israelite king and his mother, the queen, the Gibirah, were taken off into exile, into Babylon, in the Babylonian exile, we sort of lose track of the trail at that point of the monarchy of Israel. Well, when they come back out of exile in Babylon, some of them go to and create the town that is called Nazareth, and others go back to Bethlehem, which is their root, right? Which is where they're from, which is where David was from. So the town Nazareth is where the royal descendants of David, at least some of them were. So the very fact that Joseph and Mary come from that lineage is royal, but it's also very humble. Like they were like quiet lives, doing our thing. We don't need to rock the boat. We don't need to get involved. We're just quietly living a peaceful life. And it is a fascinating thought to contemplate, the fact that there could be a person out there who's quietly living, might be your neighbor. You've talked to them a billion times. You know, you hung out with them while they were taking their trash bin back after the garbage guy picked it up. And they might end up being the French monarch. And what was fascinating to me about the book that I got from Tan that was published in the 70s, I found it on eBay used, is the sheer volume of private revelation in many different countries, in many different centuries, all with the same theme. There will be a French monarch who will come at a great time of turmoil and will push back. There'll be a Holy Roman Pope, and the two of them will work together to reestablish Christendom. And that sheer volume, I think, is hard to overcome.
You asked a question that was very assiduous. I thought very interesting a few moments ago. Timeline. We know for a fact that this king right now is watching and preparing. We know that the time when he will make his presence be known is imminent. And that I know as well from some contemporary visionaries I work with. This means that since he will make himself be known in a dire situation in the European continent, a war, and partly France being partly invaded, it means that the course of events will precipitate themselves. Now, we know that this man is Catholic. He is a fervent Catholic man. He prays, he goes to Mass, he watches everything he can get his hands on. There was a particular clue of the utmost importance, and I don't remember if I mentioned it on your show. I've been to quite a few other than yours.
Sure you have.
But this is a clue that has been given through visionary stigmatist Marie-Julie Janis in Brittany on two particular messages that the French visionary stigmatist received. And the message was this: at the beginning of the unfolding of all these prophecies that we've just been talking on your show will take place between the year 80 and 83. Now, I know it's very peculiar. What did that mean? There was not 1880 to 1883, no 1980, 1983, just 1883. Blimey, Joseph, it took me forever to finally come up with a theory, which dawned on me as I was finishing the book in 2017, 2018 or so. And I came up with an idea. It had to be a point of reference based on an important event in Marie-Julie Janis' life. And then as I was finishing the book, I wrote one thing that the granddaughter of the Marquis de la Fronterie sent me, which was a prophecy that stated that God told her that her body, after she would pass away, she died in 1941 during the German occupation of France, right, Joseph? Well, her body and that of her sister, who was a remarkable helper, she loved her sister, and an exemplary Catholic, practicing Catholic, both their bodies would be exhumed and found incorrupt. Furthermore, listen to this. The body of Marie-Julie Janis would be found not only incorrupt, but her heart still beating.
Wow.
Now, I thought to myself, the only time this happened before was with Joan of Arc, when she was burned with oil by the English. After she was consumed, only her heart remained still beating with her entrails. They did it again, same thing. And they threw finally the heart to the Seine River. But I thought to myself, Joseph, could it be that the point of reference would be the death year of Marie-Julie Janis? So I began to wonder, and I added 80 years to 1941. And I reached the year 2021. I added 83 years to 1941, and I reached the year 2024. So I thought to myself, could that be it? It's extraordinary. And then I thought, what happened in 2021? Well, as we all know, it was the zenith of the pandemia, which, for the first time in church history, forced every single Roman Catholic church, or almost, around the planet to close their doors. Yeah. Incredible. What happened in 2022? The unthinkable. Russia attacked Ukraine, flirting with World War III. What happened with 2023? A world war of sorts between NATO and an alliance between Russia, Iran, North Korea, and yes, China. And what's more, the year ended with the spreading of the war through the Middle East. Now, we've just entered 2024. So that is a year which, for me at least, it forces me to hold my breath with anticipation.
Yeah.
I am not looking forward
Yeah.
for this year.
The question, does Xavier think that the burning plague in his book is a new form of COVID that was researched and published recently in China?
That's a very good question. It's too early to tell. The burning plague was foretold by Marie-Julie Janis as well. And according to the revelation she received, it will be a plague that will claim the lives of millions. And a plague through which man's medical art will find no answer. There will be, and it will be airborne, it will be terribly contagious, but there is hope. For indeed, through the revelation of Marie-Julie Janis, she states that this particular disease will be able to be counteracted with only one leaf. And again, never sure, I hate having to pronounce it because my French accent makes me handicapped with the pronunciation of this blooming thing. But it's called the hawthorn leaf, Hawthorn. And the Virgin Mary even gave a recipe how to apply it. We are, she mentioned, to drink it, to consume it 3 times a day when the early symptoms show, which will be a headache, high blood pressure, problems with speech, and tremendous burning of the skin, which will begin with redness, immediately followed with blackness and a yellow center. It will be terribly, terribly painful. But the Virgin Mary asks, as an act of faith, to, at the early stages of the symptoms, to make a fusion, a tea of sorts, with this particular hawthorn leaf. Quantity matters not. But we are supposed to boil a pot of water, and once it's boiling, to put the leaves in there, cover it with a cover for 14 minutes, not 13 minutes, not 15 minutes, but for 14 minutes. Then turn off, of course, while you do, of course, you have to turn off the fire, no? As it goes through the 14 minutes. Then make it go through a filter of sort and consume it 3 times a day with faith and with the prayers which I underline in the book. I had to tell you, Joe, difficulty accepting that. I thought this is too American Hollywood. Why would the Virgin Mary ask something of the sort? And I did not understand. Until,
as we say here in America.
Yeah, I thought something was wrong, but it came from my country, from France. And then my father, years ago, offered me a book on the miracles of Lourdes. And then I read on the Old Testament when God asked Moses to have the threshold of every Jewish home placed with the blood of the lamb to protect them from the angel destructor that was about to hit every Egyptian first son. Yeah. So I thought to myself, is this really ridiculous after all? And when I read the enormous amounts of miraculous healings that took place in Lourdes with people who either bathed or drank the water, it seemed so incredible, so sensationalist. Then I thought to myself, well, why not this? What is it that's so ridiculous about it? And then I remember something that Father Laurentin, Monsignor Laurentin, used to tell me when I worked with him. He told me, Xavier, we have always to approach everything with a spirit of criticism. But once you're convinced that this is coming from God, you cannot filter what is inconvenient and accept only that which is. We must accept it all or deny it all. So it seemed to me, again, it's an act of faith. And again, it's an act of profound love from an imploring voice, a motherly voice, what's more, that tells us how to prepare spiritually and physically. The cornerstone of the messages of the apparitions of the Virgin Mary, whether it's in Akita, approved by the Church, or in San Nicola in Argentina, approved by the Church, or in Betania, or in La Salette, or in La Fraudet, and so on and so forth, is this. Convert.
Yeah.
Convert now, before it's too late. And principally, by living your lives for the Holy Scriptures, the Gospels, by living the holy sacraments of the Catholic Church, particularly confession and the Holy Eucharist, while believing it is truly the body and blood, soul and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Did Sister Lucia suggest the whole of the third secret is contained in Revelation 12? What do you say to that, Xavier?
She did. And she mentioned that in a particular letter she wrote to Father Fuentes, a Mexican priest, and that is also in my book on the chapter of Fatima, on which states very clearly that we must, in order to find out what the third secret is, it will be revealed in Apocalypse chapter 12. That's absolutely correct. And regarding as well the Catholic Church, what you mentioned is about causing division. I for one, listen to your show quite often. I think, on the contrary, and that is one thing that attracts me very much in your show and that you do with Jacob, no? And that is the fact that you are guilty of only one thing: propagating the truth. And let's not forget that Christ was crucified for the truth.
Amen. What do you recommend, Xavier, for the French? Do you have any particularly favorite resources that you would recommend on the French Revolution?
Oh, there are so many. Most of my sources come obviously from French books. I grew up there. I studied there in France. So I would say principally the history of France with through the Larousse edition. But there are so many great writers that have written about the revolution.
I'd recommend Warren Carroll and his magnum opus, his series on Christendom. You can find, I can't remember exactly which volume it is. I can see the image on the cover in my mind, but I don't remember which volume it is in this series. But if you found and every volume is broken up by a period of time, so they have the dates on the front and the cover. You can look up Warren Carroll. He is my favorite Catholic historian, and I think his writing is spot on. So I would recommend that. Check his writing out. It's very, very, very good. Candlemas, my wife has gone crazy with the beeswax. Like she spent all weekend long, boiling and making beeswax, 100% beeswax candles, and she's got a supply. I'm like, how many beeswax candles does one need? 3 Days of Darkness says, the prophecies say you only need one to last all 3 days. It's part of the miracle. Is there any mention of does it need to be beeswax? I guess is my question.
According to Saint Padre Pio, and to stigmatist visionary Marie-Julie Janis, who was informally approved by her local bishop, yes, it must be 100% beeswax. And it is good to know that according to the prophecy by both saints, once the 3 days of darkness will begin, the candle could be this big, it will not get consumed. It will last 3 days, even if it is that small or that small. And only one should be sufficient.
Cool. What do you think of Les Miserables? What's your opinion of Les Miserables?
Victor Hugo's Miserables. I had to make a thesis paper on it when I was in France. I hate the story. I hate working on that particular thing. It gives me the blues. It's a very French Victor Hugoian work. I'm not a particular fan.
So many Catholics will say they love Les Miserables. I've seen it. I'm like, it's so French Revolution.
It's pretty anti-clerical.
What are we doing here? Why are we doing
yes,
this?
it's depressing. It's profoundly
Yeah.
depressing,
It
and
is.
I don't find any attraction to it myself, of course.
Yeah, I'm in that camp for sure. Best place to buy Hawthorne tea. What would you recommend?
That's a marvelous question. In my book, I refer to a lady called Mrs. Kathleen Loney. I think she's in Ohio. She's superb lady, magnificent person, and she sells everything, including the sacramentals of Marie-Julie Janis at cost. Now, she has had a lot of problems. She lost her husband recently. She had a hip replacement, so she was late with a lot of orders. But now she just sent me, without me ordering it, 2-pound bags that's sealed with aluminum, filled with hawthorn leaves. So I ordered another 2, and you can order. You have on my book the email address when you can order it. All I ask is in advance forgiveness on her behalf, because she's overwhelmed. She's forced to get somebody to help her, and she's getting orders from all across the world. And sometimes she's a little bit late, but please be indulgent and don't be suspicious of any scam or anything. So she's a charming lady, wingless angel. She always fulfills the orders, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time because of the overwhelming amount of orders.
Xavier, do you have any knowledge of the history of the Templar or the Templars, and if there is a connection to the Freemasons? I have an answer to that, but Xavier, what would you say to that?
Yes, I am familiar with the history of the Templars. It's very complicated. It goes back to the times when they came back from the Holy Land to France. the French king, Philippe V, had a tremendous financial debt with the Templars. And in order to avoid having to pay such debt, he exterminated them. This immediately led a secret society within France and later within other nations that became not only to be anti-king, anti-royalist, but anti-Catholics and Christians. So they developed and they brought a great deal of treasures from the Holy Land. We know that part of wings from their organizations have also worked, and to this day are still working, with the Illuminati that work with Freemasonic lodges. I know, again, it sounds very much like the Da Vinci Code movie script, but there is a lot of truth in those particular scripts. They take their movies and the script based on information they get from true sources. It is a matter to take, to a certain point, very seriously. Because, as I said, very much like in 1917, when the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to the children and announced prophecies which at the time made absolutely no sense. It wasn't realistic. Today we're living with something of the same sort. Remember, in 1917, when the Virgin in Fatima appeared, and she announced, when the war was not even, there was no light at the end of the tunnel yet. No, she announced, and it was a butchery. We all know, I had a grandfather who fought in World War I. He never had a proper night's sleep since 1918 until he passed away because of the inhumanity of the war. When the Virgin announced through them that this war would end, but a second one would occur sometimes thereafter, worse than the first one, if humanity did not return to her son, nobody wanted to hear those words. When she said that if humanity does not convert and returns to her son, Russia would spread her errors. Russia was a third world country that just had been pulverized by the armies of the Kaiser and of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They were pulverized and placed on their knees. It was a huge country with a massive mass of land held and protected by an army of Cossacks who were so drunk half of the time they could not stand straight on their horses. It wasn't realistic. Today, some of the events, all the prophecies that have been told since La Salette in the mid-1800s all the way to Father Michel Rodrigue, today seemed then unrealistic, and today we are seeing the reality of these then unrealistic prophecies become a reality. We are living it. All of these prophecies today being a reality, whether it's in Eastern Europe, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in Asia, and in the Pacific, in the Sea of China, and in the Sea of Japan, with North Korea making nuclear tests, or whether it's even in the United States. We are starting to live prophecy.
Does Xavier have any comments about the devotion to the Holy Face, which was founded in France? How do you feel about the Holy Face devotion?
Oh, yes. It's very, very, very important. I recommend everyone to study it, to live the devotion to the Holy Face, but as well, in recommendation to Father Michel Rodrigue, I invite everyone, as per the instructions he received from God the Father, to have also a strong devotion for the Holy Family. On one instance, more than one instance, God the Father informed Father Michel that one instrument of protection for the homes will be to have either a photo, a picture, a painting, or a small statuette of the Holy Family, and to have it blessed by a priest. He received a revelation that indeed those who will do so with faith and devotion and will pray the rosary before it will have their homes, their goods, and their families protected when the time of the cataclysm is to come.
What does Xavier think of Notre Dame restoration work? Does he agree with the choices? Yeah, Notre Dame. What is, like, golly whiz. To talk about the French Revolution, it's the French government who owns Notre Dame. So, like, when is the church going to take back what is hers in France? Xavier Reyes, what do you say?
Well, actually, it's part of the patrimony of France, the Cathedral of Notre Dame, but it's a place of cult. It is managed by the Roman Catholic Church. So yes, when after the fire took place, I think it was in 2019, immediately all the masks in France fell, because first and foremost, those who appeared first were the Freemasonic lodges of Paris and France, who stepped forward and said, well, this is a nation of laicity, so this should be, and this is the patrimony of France, that includes the agnostic, the atheist, the Jewish, everyone, including the Freemasons. And they try to do some sort of abomination with a new flesh, the top, what we call the arrow on the top, put new stain color windows. And thank God the Catholic Church in France put a stop to this rubbish and had it reconstructed and rebuilt exactly as it was originally. It took quite many years because we had to use a great deal of artisanat of the old times and cut wood from major foresters to do exactly what was done before. And by the way, just a brief note, the entire fire incident of Notre Dame is still under investigation. They still do not understand how those big boiseries that are massive could have caught fire. If you put a flame underneath, you will see the flame will go under this massive boiserie of wood. No, it doesn't catch. It's too massive. They still are at a loss and understanding. And as a Frenchman, I want to give testimony of this. When the Cathedral of Notre Dame was burning, and I was watching live French TV, I was not able, like millions of my compatriots, I was not able to keep my eyes dry. No, you could see on French TV a massive amount of Arabs on the other side of the Seine River watching the smoke above and the fire flames coming out of Notre Dame, screaming while smiling, Allah Akbar, which means God is great, which is a scream of war of all the Muslim terrorists. That, as long as I'm able to open my eyes, will never be forgotten as a Frenchman.
Will the 3 days of darkness come after the miracle?
Well, according to prophecy, there will indeed be the warning. Then there will be a miracle on Pine Hill and possibly on Apparition Hill in Medjugorje. Then there will be the chastisement. The 3 days of darkness, according to prophecy through Marie-Julie Janis in La Fraudet, will take place shortly after the liberation of Rome and the placing on the throne of Peter of this angelic pope. Then, according to prophecy, the 3 days of darkness will take place. And after the 3 days of darkness, the war will cease because of lack of combatants. And a new rebirth, a renaissance of sorts, will start spreading throughout the remnant of world society and Roman Catholic Church.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.